One thing I think all corporates have in common is this DNA that if someone shows you or if you realize that, hey, wait a second, we're below average in a certain area, then there is a tendency that you want to improve. And I think that if you're capable of recognizing with different partners their own development areas and they start improving on this, then the whole industry will move ahead and we will as an industry improve trust in charging, both in the availability, but especially on the operation side as well.
Hello and welcome back to In Between Charges. I am joined, as always, by my co-host, Mike Hawks. Mike, how are we doing today?
Fantastic, thanks. Very good. Looking forward to getting into today's discussion.
Mike, one of our core values at Monta is transparency, right?
Correct.
We try to share a little data far and wide, push the industry forward. We want to shed some light on what's going on in this industry with the mounds and mounds of data that we sit on. It's something that we have held near and dear to our hearts since we started at Monta. But I would say that transparency is not really the standard in the EV charging industry. A lot of companies are private companies. Not many of them are publicly traded. There are a lot of different business models. So you can never be quite sure who is crushing it and who's maybe struggling behind the LinkedIn headlines, right? And everyone's kind of eyeing each other a little bit. Are they doing well or is that just a big headline? But today we are going to try to dig into this topic a little bit more. And that topic is CPO performance and the performance of companies in our industry. So we have someone who knows a thing or two about the EV charging industry, and our guest is Rami Syväri. Rami is a consultant and advisor at beY0nd Group, where he works with some of the largest charging operators in Europe, applying his deep knowledge from having worked for some of the largest operators himself, from Fortum in the Nordics to Swisscharge in Switzerland, and many others in between. So Rami knows what good looks like, and maybe more importantly, he knows what not so good looks like. And we are very excited to welcome him to the show. Rami, welcome to In Between Charges.
Thank you so much. My pleasure being here. Thanks for having me. And I'm looking forward to a good discussion today.
Excellent. Rami, maybe you could just start us off with telling us how you got into the e-mobility space and what is one or two big things that have changed since you started in e-mobility to where we are in 2025?
Well, that's a good question. It's a while ago, and at the time I was working at Fortum, and I'd been working with new solutions, new energy solutions. We had been launching some hardware to the markets to show live electricity consumptions to consumers, things like this. But we also had been doing some visionary work on where this might be leading, and we had this idea of awareness coming from this in-home display, then control coming from smart home solutions, and at some point there might be independence for users, and that could be a combination of solar and electric vehicles. And I thought that's far away. And a year later, I was country manager at Charge and Drive for Finland. So it wasn't that far away. And on the first working day, we opened the first commercial 50 kilowatt quick charger in Finland. So it is a while ago.
Yeah. Maybe we can use that as a jumping off point here is the Fortum and then your experiences in Switzerland and CPO performance at those companies. And now maybe a little bit as you're now advising and consultant to other CPOs, how are you determining success and how are you benchmarking success, maybe beyond the simple profit and loss revenue numbers?
It's a really relevant question because I think in any company, success is very often measured in comparison to one's history. So we like to look into last year, the year before, how have we performed in relation to those. And the other thing we like to do is we like to look into our plans. So we do a business plan, a business case, and then we start comparing with that. And those are very relevant things to look at. But if you're successful or not is in the end coming to the relation how you perform to the market. That is the thing about success is in the end, you need to outperform the market, outperform other players in the sense to be chosen by customers to be successful in the market.
But then I guess can you help us understand that a little bit more from the inside out? Because, we talk a lot about how kilowatt hours is the thing that's traded, but, realistically what people are looking for is something that's nearby and a really good performance. So how do you actually stand out relative to the crowd and how do you demonstrate that you are performing better than some of the other particularly large networks that are looking for workplace charging, etc.? I think in the fast charging industry or the fast charging subsector, it's probably a little bit easier to differentiate. You have a brand that people recognize, you have ultra fast chargers, you have traffic all the time, the best sites. But this public CPO space is quite a mix of lots of different types of performances and charge points and drivers that they're trying to go after.
Yes, you can dig deeper into the different use cases. I mean, is it a high power charging hub along a highway? Is it a destination charger at a shopping center or in a city center? Is it private charging in a garage of a company for the company fleets? So all of these have a bit of different things that we need to look at. But in the end, very much if you want to generalize it, it's about function, that it works when you basically come there. It's about location, that it's easy to basically find and use, and very much about the customer experience for the users. I think those are the things which do apply for all of them.
Those factors, the reason those are prioritized is because those are upstream of winning more sites, installing more chargers, winning more customers and everything, right? And that's the only way. If you hit on all of those and you're delivering this great experience, your brand builds in a certain region. You're able to be known for quality, and then it just kind of builds on itself, and you win that next one because they heard about across town. You did a great job there. You provided some premium service, reliable chargers, a great experience, and that kind of just builds.
In the beginning, I mean, there were not so many around. So if you were able to basically provide a service, then you were already almost chosen. Then I would say came the word of mouth. More and more, I would say today we start seeing professional kind of marketing activity as well, which companies do to attract their customers. But I think that more and more where we move towards becomes really like a question that we need to really make sure that these things are applied, that we have basically customers having an easy access to the chargers, that the experience at the charger, that it's both available and operative, and then basically that the surrounding of these locations and what the customers expect, that we can fulfill these kind of things as well. So there is several parameters basically which you need to apply, but I would say that those are the key points where in the end your performance is being measured.
And then how does this kind of work for you and beY0nd Group, right, as a consultant? Is there a CPO out there that says, God, I just don't even know how to measure this. We missed our targets last year. We need to turn this around. I'm looking for maybe somebody who can help me tighten the ship and get this right. Rami's my guy. And then what do you come in? What toolbox are you bringing to the table to help a CPO hit their plan for 2025 or 2026?
Where we basically saw a need in the market, I think, is that coming from what I said before about what success is, basically comparing to giving the possibility to compare to the outside world. I think that is something which is lagging in the industry today. And so what we have started developing, and we're at the moment in the pilot phase to basically going ahead with that, is that we create a benchmarking service for CPOs, which you can say in a sense it's from CPOs to CPOs, that we collect data from CPOs, anonymize this data, and feed them back a benchmarking report so that they can see, in a sense, how they perform in different categories on different KPIs in relation to the market. I think this is an approach which in the market will give us a leverage as an industry and overall, because one thing I think all corporates have in common is this DNA that if someone shows you, or if you realize that, hey, wait a second, we're below average in a certain area, then there is a tendency that you want to improve. And I think that if you're capable of recognizing with different partners their own development areas and they start improving on this, then the whole industry will move ahead, and we will as an industry improve trust in charging, both in the availability, but especially on the operation side as well.
It's interesting to see and find like little pockets of opportunities within benchmarking data report. You can start to see, how elastic demand is to pricing changes for a charge point. You can start to try to run some correlations between hardware, et cetera, that's higher performing than others. But how easy have you actually found it to get that data from operators to be able to benchmark other businesses against?
Yes, I've been working with different corporates in the energy space for a while, also listed companies. So the privacy of data I very much understand and appreciate. And that is also the thing that we also want to be able to ensure for our customers is that data is really secure. So basically when we get data, it's not public data after that. It's anonymized. And basically what goes back to each of the CPOs is their own KPI in relation on a scale. Mm-hmm. So it is not a ranking. So there will be no other CPO names in that report. And it's really about providing a service for the CPO themselves, for the internal use, for them to be able to look into the mirror and see basically their strength and development areas.
Okay. So then maybe a question on the kind of data model and I guess the approach that you look at. So you talked about charging performance. We talk about utilization of the network. You talk about price, you talk about sites, locations, etc. How does any benchmarks around maybe like operational performance or day-to-day performance of the software or the back-end system play into some of the recommendations that you're making or some of the averages that you start to see in the industry?
What we basically do is that we have predefined, in a sense, certain categories of KPIs which we want to benchmark. And now in the pilot phase, in fact, we are very much talking about getting feedback on the whole, basically, concept, on the different KPIs, on everything that works. But the idea is that we have the customer satisfaction KPIs, where, as an example, the number of charge points in average on a location or the power level that you get, these kind of things are included. Or one which is, I think, very relevant and very brutally honest is Google Map ratings. So in a sense that we really try to get an understanding on the customer experience in a most valuable way for the CPO. But we also have a category around operational excellence, where we look at uptime or success rates. We have rollout efficiency, financial health, and we've been already now asked by partners to look into sustainability or health and safety. So it really is about cooperating together with our partners, the CPOs, to understand where the value is and to provide as much as value for them into their internal development as possible.
I think it's fascinating. I would love to be a fly in the wall in some of these conversations to really see what comes up. And I guess from our experience, if you think about it from the software angle, customers come to us and they might say, hey, we're having a problem with attracting these customers because we can't bolt on a fleet use case. Or, hey, we know that there is some problems with a particular set of areas because we've got hardware type 1, 2, 3 and our OCPP perhaps isn't implemented to the highest level. How can you make sure that we're meeting the kind of 1.6 standards? And what we tend to see is there's a mix of archetypes, at least from a software point of view. Either businesses have built in-house, they've started to develop and use some sort of components from various third parties, or they go with a platform at play, basically, and then they can build some differentiating features on top. And does that ever come into the discussion, or do you tend to see any differences between performance if you think about those three different software archetypes or approaches or strategies, however we want to call it?
I would love to hear this question in 5 years, because then I would be able to talk about, in a sense, data-based.
Yeah.
Of course, not revealing anything which can't be revealed. But I mean, that is basically what will be a good basis to understand things when we really have worked with this for a while. Out of experience, I would say there is a very clear difference between these different use cases. I think there is clear development, which we can see that, especially in the beginning, there were systems which wanted to do everything, basically in one monolith kind of system. I think there has been a tendency towards having systems which have a very strong, let's say, OCPP core. And then it's said that, okay, we can do a lot with APIs. And then through that, in a sense, making a case for a corporate maybe to integrate certain of their systems easier. I think it's very much, and that I think is maturity of the market as well, that we can start having different solutions for different maturity levels of CPOs and also for different operating environments that they have. A CPO, which is let's say, a single standing startup, as an example, basically being independently funded. It's a different setup than when we look at a corporate venture, where the venture has some strategic interest to integrate the charging business as much as possible into their, let's say, environment and do some cross and upselling kind of things.
We were just talking about that this morning, actually. We've got both. We have corporate users using Monta, and then we have what we call charge point entrepreneurs, who are 1 to 10 employees, right? And they're, trying to get from 50 chargers to 3,000 chargers, right? And there are different ways that they're approaching this question, right? And it's kind of fascinating to see.
It is. And I would say, in your case, it's really it's an interesting journey to follow the growth of a business like that. Because from where we came from at the time, it was so that we noticed that in the beginning, someone wanted us to do as much as possible. So if we were able to do the billing, if we were able to provide in customer service, if we were able to even to install, they would have been happy about that. But then when the business matures, then step by step, in a sense, with the maturity, there comes an interest also to take certain areas of that business into your own hand and add some more basically differentiating factors to it. And I think that is something for a platform which is very relevant to be able to basically take the customer through this maturing journey, so to say, and be willing to give basically elements to the customer and basically support that.
I really like what you've been saying. It's about kind of growing alongside the partner, and I guess also figuring out what is core business service, non-revenue driving versus something that will actually create a different voice or basically a differentiator in the market. How do you differentiate on price? How do you differentiate, customer loyalty programs or something like this? There's many things that people can look at. We started working on a project where we do integrating specific parking sensor that one of our customers have within their parking garage, so you can more accurately see how many charging bays are basically open. All of those quite small, poignant things that will make a big difference to the user experience.
Yes.
Yeah, very interesting.
And I think there is some truth in this differentiating things, and especially in the customer interface as well. I mean, for the customer, in a sense, when they interact with a CPO or an e-mobility services provider, those are the interfaces the customer sees. They don't see what happens in the background. But I think that is very relevant for a service provider to develop themselves towards having a very unique and, in a sense, value-adding experience to the customer. What we said before, it is basically about the experience when the user is at a location. This is such a fascinating industry because we have this full basically combination of digital world and physical world, that it's not enough that we have a perfect app as a CPO. It's not enough that we have a perfect location. No, in fact, it has both to be quite perfect to create that experience for a customer, which really creates a winning sauce.
Yeah. What, speaking of winning sauces,
Kevin's had a great lunch today, so he's been talking
really
about
good lunch. We're talking a little bit about tech architecture, but in terms of kind of like business models, I guess, separate from the kind of tech stack that these companies are putting together. I was just at about a month ago at the Las Vegas EV Charging Summit. You were just at Power to Drive just last week, and the variety of businesses that are the models that they're putting together. But one kind of overriding thing I heard was, in Las Vegas anyway, was, oh, you can't make any money off AC charging. That's all in DC. There's no margin there in anything. And I'm like, okay. We have some partners that I think are making some money off AC charging. It's a different model, right, than the DC charging. Where do you kind of stand on these approaches? A mixture, right? I guess you can sit on the fence and choose a nice mixture. Or what do you think about the AC versus DC charging business models?
Well, I really like the word use case. And I mean, it really is a bit the question that in which situation are we offering what to the drivers? And I mean, it wouldn't come to mind even, but now since we're talking, it comes to my mind to say, but put a high power charging into our carport. It would be totally in the wrong place and totally overinvested and everything. So I think it really is about that question. And I'm very happy with AC at the moment. I think at some point of time, if I would have a certain technological setting, I would love to have bidirectional. So I think these kind of questions will come up. Yes, I know there's the question AC or DC, but I think maybe I bring in a thought which I've been carrying with me now for a couple of years. I would really love to see ultra slow charging. Why I'm bringing this up is the point that there are use cases where cars are standing for a very long time. So let it be a full day, half a day, let it be maybe even 2 days. And very often the hardware that we are installing or the solutions that we are providing to customers, they are too powerful for those situations. But then on the other side, you need to have a very low investment to make the whole thing work. And I think this is a bit the question that, does AC make money? I think it does. Because in the end, it's about your cost side. Yeah. I mean, isn't that what whole business is about? Yeah. In a sense, as long as you're getting
costs
more in that you're spending, then you're probably doing a positive business.
Proven model. So it's many different industries.
Further to the business model question, you are in Switzerland, right?
Yep.
Close to Germany. Germany famously or infamously fell off a cliff last year in terms of EV adoption. They're picking back up in Q1, as far as I know. A few other countries are kind of going through their different journeys right now of a down quarter, up quarter, et cetera. Are you seeing meaningful impacts to business models when these adoption rates go down? Are we talking missed utilization for the year? They had anticipated this many kilowatt hours sold and it's going to be lower. This many chargers sold and it's lower or higher. How kind of quick is that relationship between EV adoption dropping off and the charging business missing their targets for that year?
I think that's probably one of the biggest topics at the moment in Europe. I mean, I like to call it a market hiccup, but it's not a small hiccup. I mean, it's a massive hiccup. We had Corona, we have war in Europe, we have inflation, we have rising interest rates, we have a dropping purchasing power, we have delayed investments into vehicles. And through that, in a sense, this fantastic growth curve that we were all drawing into our business cases for years, basically, that basically got a decent hit. And I mean, I don't know how many charging industry players are out there where the registration rate has not been part of the business plan, because registration rate has basically been the basis for vehicle number, and the numbers of vehicles has been the basis for estimates of charging events and charging electricity volumes, etc. So it has definitely hit the industry heavily. And I mean, we see it in companies being shut down. We see companies or business being sold. We see management being exchanged. We see all kinds of things in the market going on, which I would claim that these are all related to this, that in a sense, suddenly the business plans and cases didn't work out. And I really like to, in a sense, see this situation as something where there is a kind of like a moment in the industry development where winners already can be forged, because this is very much about understanding the big picture, and that big picture hasn't changed.
Yeah. Exactly. I think it's a really poignant thing, because the next question was going to be like, yes, there are kind of some businesses that perhaps can't make ends meet, etc. But whilst EV adoption maybe contributes to that, there are probably other problems that's happening, right? If I think, okay, EVs dropped by 5% this year, the public charge points that are being installed still have to wait 6 to 9 to 12 months before they get the energy permitted. So those projects aren't basically going to stop. There'll be a big change maybe with residential hardware, because there's like a direct relationship between vehicle and then private homes. But then for public and semi-public, if you still believe that, in 1 year, 2 years time, you need to get this infrastructure in the ground, there's still a long lead time. Maybe there's a dip in utilization because you see 5% less vehicles out on the road. So there's less competition for the individual sites.
Yeah, I think on the utilization side, for sure, it shows if the vehicles don't come on the road, then of course they are not using the infrastructure. I saw a report that in fact building has kept on going quite well in Europe. I think we just hit 1 million public charge points in Europe, etc. I think the industry has maybe stepped a bit on the brake, but EV is growing. I mean, it's not so that the combustion cars have basically started winning the game back. It's really more that it's been postponed investments. And that's why I also like to say that I think we're moving towards a catch-up bottle effect. Because, it's postponed investments. At the same time, we're still moving. The cars are being used. The vehicles are being used. They will come to the point that they need to be exchanged. And, the rate in which they're being exchanged towards electric, that is, it's obvious. People go on that track. And we will see, basically, that there will be coming a big registration wave towards us. So the industry should be prepared for that.
Did you say ketchup bottle effect? If you have a glass ketchup bottle and you're trying to tap the ketchup out and then it suddenly goes? Or?
Yeah, exactly that.
Yeah, okay. So it reaches a pressure point and then bang, and then the floodgates are open.
And then your burger's ruined.
And then, yeah, exactly. Well, it depends how much you like ketchup, I guess.
Yes, when you have a lot of that red sauce on your spaghetti.
Okay, so you're having these conversations with, public operators, fast charging operators, utility companies, etc., and they're coming to you and they're saying, hey, Rami, we're having a little bit of a problem now. We might see utilization start to dip. We're starting to see some challenges here. We're maybe average or a little bit below average or a little bit above average. What should we do? What is your kind of mantra to them? And why do you, because it sounds like you really believe that game time is now, and this is an opportunity for businesses that are doing well to really grab the right pieces of land, grab the right grid connections and get chargers in the ground so they can be the most poignant players now and in the future. So why do you still believe that the moment for this is right now, an opportunity to keep building while others, I guess, pull back a little bit?
When you, in a sense, don't see the big picture, you lose trust into the business because the numbers aren't delivered and things start happening, as I said before. So basically, for those who see the big picture, believe in the situation and believe in the figures coming back, there are possibilities basically for not only keep on building and finding locations, but also to maybe consolidate the industry and do some acquisitions and things, which again would position you as a stronger player when the market starts getting off again. And I think that is one of the things at the moment why this is so juicy for those players who are really into the game and really want to be among the leading players also in the future. So I think it's a really interesting and good time for them. One thing in these kind of market situations where we are now, and as I said, we have in the charging industry or in the EV industry, we were quite lucky in a sense with all the growth rates that we were seeing for more than 10 years practically, and we got a bit used to that. But I think one thing, of course, in business leadership, which you should always have in place, is the very solid understanding of not being able to see the future. And I think it's the question always what comes to business planning as well. Is a plan something which is a absolute truth, or is it a version of a possible future? And when you see it as a version of a possible future, the question is, okay, what other versions could be there? And you should have this plan in place that, okay, how do we get to profitability with this plan? But then you should have another plan which says that, hey, if things crash, what do we do differently in that moment of time? What are the first adjustments that we start doing immediately when we start seeing it happening, so that in a sense we have another path to profitability in a crushed situation? But then on the other side, you also, and this is interesting in these kind of technology disruption industries, that it might also happen that an industry just grows so much faster than you can imagine. And you should have an understanding as well, okay, what do we do? What is our path to profitability if that happens? One says always, yeah, make a normal case and then make an up case and down case. It's very easily said, and then you do it like, okay, 10% more and 10% less. No, really have a thought on that. That what if everything crashes, or what if everything explodes in a positive way? And what are actions that you need to take to basically to work in these different scenarios?
There's a lot of hiccups you mentioned that the companies really have to navigate here, right? And some are hitting their targets and then some are downgrading their targets. And I think the thing that I think we talk about a fair bit is these chargers are still going in, right? They're going in all these contexts and they're getting put in selfishly from a Monta point of view, is we're like, hey, you're building a business right now, and we want to give you the tool to build your business. You're going to hit a wall at some point, and trying to like bring that forward, right? Where it's like, I know you thought you could chart this path with this current setup, but guess what? You're going to hit a wall. But it's hard to tell someone they're going to hit a wall when they haven't done it, right? And so we're kind of like, Monta as a charging software platform, we would of course love to see a higher percentage share in all the markets, and just have this ketchup bottle exploding all over the continent of Europe. But we're downstream from that a little bit, right? And so whether it's 25 or 15% in Germany, we're not selling Teslas and BMWs in Germany. We are selling our software to the utilities in Germany that are providing that charging, right? And whether it's 15 or 25% this quarter, they are still running a charging business right now in Germany. And their utilization might be a little lower, maybe their sales are a little bit lower, but they're still using software. So our challenge is to like go and convince them and say, you should be using our software to build your business right now. But the flip side of that lower registration is that maybe you're working with some of these CPOs, is they get kind of conservative, right? If you're holding on right now, you're trying to get through this big hiccup in 2025. Well, maybe migrating your 5,000 charge points in 2025 is not priority number one. It might not even be priority number 7, because your priorities 1 through 6 or stay alive at all costs. And that's where it's interesting, right? These businesses are still there. They're not going bust. Those charge points are still in the ground. They're still charging. And so this kind of fascinating kind of interplay between all these adoption rates, businesses, then they're making these decisions of how to approach this and build these businesses and models in a context that is so fluid.
You're absolutely right. And I would say that there is one thing about the situation is that the industry was for years focusing very clearly on rollout and growth. So everything was about building. And I think a couple of years at the time in the organization, we started looking into, operations. We need to make sure that it's not about building only, but we need to have a very, very solid operation in place as well to ensure basically the customer experience. And I would say that is a bit the question in this situation now as well, using this basically time now as an opportunity. Because that's what it is. It's an opportunity, especially is also an opportunity to prepare for scaling.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that is something which one should always use pauses for. You should basically look at, how are we performing? How are we doing in preparation when it goes into growth again? And one should use, in a sense, this time to improve one's value chain, to make sure that the systems and the architecture that you have can take the next wave.
Yeah.
One should make sure that during the time one finds the source to make the customers especially happy, that your NPS goes up, instead of rolling out like crazy. And in that sense, in system sales, I think that is an angle where you bring value.
Yeah.
Because if you're basically bringing benefits to the table where you say that through your tools, the customer satisfaction, the operational excellence can be increased, the scaling will be prepared, then it's a good time to be in discussions.
Nice. I think that maybe leads in quite nicely to the next point about, if you are an organization that's then going to really kind of seize the moment right now, right? We're towards the end of Q2 25. Auto manufacturers are going to start releasing their full results, relatively soon. We're halfway through the year, about to enter the summer period. Before we know it, it's going to be December. We're going to be into 2026, and there's going to be a whole new realm of challenges that we have to try to solve for.
Whoa, come on.
Well, think about it,
halfway through May, and you're already on December.
Well, companies take a year to build their 3-year strategy, and up to the end of 2026, there's only 6 quarters left. But then
stop and smell the roses.
Yeah. So when you are working with these companies, Rami, and you're kind of advising them, how do you typically work with companies to build and ultimately a leading charging business? What are some of those tips and tricks and pointers that you usually give and work with to help people be the top of the pack?
I think it starts by basically identifying, so to say, the strength and the development areas. I mean, each business has both of them. I mean, you usually are good at something and you usually have something where you basically can improve. One thing which I'm very much am fond of is basically partnerships. So in a sense, I see a business as something where you create basically win-win-win situations between basically players. So one thing is that when you identify development areas is the question, okay, how is your value chain set up? What elements do you have here? What basically hardware, software, services are you using, financing? Which basically partners are you basically working with? And that is something where when you dig into that, there might be already things where you can recognize that there are opportunities to improve. But it can also be questions about the ways of working, processes, or maybe even strategic questions where, in a sense, one can say that, hey, guys, are you totally clear with your strategy and how you want to win this game? And I think it's very individual, in a sense, the question that how to start improving that. I'm very fond of certain concepts in business. One is that coaching leadership is something which I'm a very big fan of. I think the responsibility always needs to be there. I don't want to take away any responsibility or any decisions. It's really about basically guiding people there. And another thing which I'm very keen to is progressive organizations what comes to leadership kind of models. And that's, I think, also an interesting question when it comes to companies. How are they set up to scale, but also as an organization? So I think these kind of questions can be basically brought to the table as well. But of course, I mean, it's, as I said, it's very individual. It's very much about how much and how deep one wants to basically go in the discussions.
Correct. Thanks.
We should bring him in, help us out.
Help our customers out.
Oh, no, help them out. Yeah. Help them.
The customers who are with us have already got their strategy. Right.
Yeah. Take them to the next level.
I'm happy about every introduction. So,
Rami, we're going to start off just a big question. What is e-mobility all about here? We're talking about kind of two separate industries that have collided, energy on the one hand and mobility on the other. Is this relationship between the two, how do you kind of see that developing? Are we headed towards utopia where it's going to be just beautiful, clean cars driving around and powering up the grid and everything? Are we all really capable of that? Is it going to be kind of a more mixed bag? We see a lot of utilities getting involved in this space, but then you see tech companies that are involved in this space. You see totally new players that have some venture-backed money or private equity, money and everything. And so in the United States, it's a lot of, I would say, people from engineering firms are in there, lighting firms are getting involved. A lot of people are kind of throwing the dice here. You kind of see a lot of people from a lot of different areas. So is e-mobility going to be its own separate category here? And there's going to be, in 5-10 years, there'll be a really sharply defined e-mobility category of charging providers, or does it kind of stay mixed and everything between all of these different industries?
Wow, what a question.
Yeah.
So where are we heading towards? Well, I think if we start with where are we heading towards, I think one thing is very clear is that we will see a full electrification of transport where certain niches which can't be basically served yet will have to find alternative solutions. But what I'm really like to see at the moment is that we can already now see that we mostly talk about cars, but already now, and that has been quite clear in the last conferences as well in the last couple of 3 years, that as an example, heavy transport, and especially long-haul heavy transport, which for many has been that, hey, we can electrify all kinds of city cars and stuff, but no, heavy long-haul, that will burn some kind of things, or it will needs at least hydrogen. On the same side, we start seeing electrification in aviation. We see electrification in maritime application. And of course, it will take time, and I'm sure that we in this round, we can basically work with charging until we retire easily. So I think this is really like a long-term game. What will that bring with it? It brings two things. Of course, there is a certain consumption coming with that, but it also brings a lot of storage with it. So one can say that electric vehicles challenge the energy industry. On the other side, they also bring with them a bit of the solution as well. When we talk about sector coupling and these industries moving close together, mobility and energy, I think there is much wisdom in that thinking. And looking at the different industry players, as you said, I mean, there's all kinds of players coming into the game, but we see especially, I mean, the car manufacturers are in the game, the electricity companies are in the game, the oil industry is in the game, and many others as well. And what I usually tend to try to guide what comes to strategy is that very often it's so that a company or a business has a very clear core where you know how it is and where the industry knowledge is and the experience is, and it can be over generations basically that experience. And for me, it's certain kind of wisdom that when you expand your strategy, that you expand somewhere which is close to your core. Mm-hmm. And in a sense, I've seen electricity companies or energy companies wanting to start renting cars, as an example. So there are probably many other companies and industries out there who are much better in handling cars than the energy industry. So the question is, why should you expand there? Why don't you stay a bit closer? And the same question comes to the car industry as well. Isn't there other companies out there where being an energy company or handling the energy system is basically much closer to their core? And in a sense, when we see these industries going too far in their expansion, I think that is a bit where they sometimes run into challenges. And that is also a reason why I'm a fan of partnering in business, because in the end, when you combine these kind of experiences, which have been built up over generations, when you combine that and forge partnerships and get closer in a sense with your core, so to say, to another player, then I think that is something where real value can be created.
Yeah.
There's my hope in a sense going ahead as well, that the industries find more joint ground and more cooperation than trying to, in a sense, outperform an industry which has been doing that what they've been doing for 100 years.
Yeah. Makes me think of Uber, and where people thought that Uber would be maybe a big CPO themselves, right? Like that's kind of adjacent to the ride hailing, and they've got a big fleet of cars, and so surely maybe they want to open up a charging network, and they haven't done anything, right? They just do partnerships. Makes me think of sometimes we talk about potential competitors. People are like, oh, Google's pretty good with stuff. Maybe they're going to make an OCPP backend or something. They haven't done it yet. This is kind of a different thing. And then 3, when you talk about utilities and these energy companies doing it, when they build their own OCPP backend charge management software, that kind of baffles me too. I know they have a lot of people, a lot of resources, but I'm also kind of like, is that really in your core? And you know how to build a great charging management software platform? Is that what you as a utility really know how to do? It is kind of interesting because I'm like, is that really going to be the long-term play for Total Energy, for EDF, for Engie, for the utilities in Germany? Is that really your play? You think you can build software for the next 20 years?
Yeah, and I would also say we share a very similar ethos, Rami, yourselves and us as well. We talk about it a lot in this podcast about knowing your area, knowing your pillar very well, and guess then staying in your lane and bringing the best of your capabilities to market. So we know software, and that's our core. And that's what we use to then also build on what a management system could ultimately do. And I guess long term, the hope is that, things like vehicle to grid, et cetera, become more of a widely adopted capability. So they're actually what we're doing is working with a ubiquitous fuel that can be traded and shared and consumed at any one time. And it's constantly out there in the environment. I guess that's what I thought you were also leading to that when you were talking about ultra slow charging, trying to encourage people to be plugged in as much as possible so that the excess in that battery could be used at any one time, whilst guaranteeing that you're hitting a good share to be able to drive home from your ski chalet in Austria, or whatever it is.
It's a good point which you're saying. There was a time in these steps I had the pleasure to basically go through. At some time I was initiating basically a business around the backend system. But in the next step, I was in a situation where I very much opposed the idea of basically building an own system. And I think it's really coming down to the question that in which moment of time in the industry are you, which maturity do you have? My advice would be to consider the thing, are you building something for your own use only? Or are you building something which you believe that you can have a significant position in Europe or even globally? And if you would answer the third option basically with no, then I would definitely not advise to go into own software development. And again, we come to profitability questions. You just have to have a lot of volume and a lot of charge point out there connected to your system if you think that that is the right path to go. Yeah. And probably you will not have enough by yourself compared to basically partnering with someone who is basically doing that and making sure that you can do the differentiation of your services still.
It's hard to play both of those lines at the same time if you're bridging hardware, physical installations, etc. Also with the, as you say, the black hole of development space where you are trying to then, I don't know, I guess compete with your own business model back in your kind of home area.
I mean, at the time when, from Fortum point of view, basically build up the charge and drive backend business, that was, I think, one of our strengths to be able to communicate that we are a CPO. So we basically know this business, and this is basically what we built for ourselves. So there is a certain benefit in that angle, which one can communicate into the market. But you need to be very clear, as you say as well, about basically where you draw lines between the businesses, where you don't come in a situation where you basically compete with your customers and these kind of situations. And I would say another question is, at which point of time do you do these moves? But in most of the cases, partnering, I think, is the right way of setting up a value chain.
So we all agree that partnerships are the way to go in our industry.
So Rami, to end the show, we always like to finish on the same question. And the reason why we ask this is because it's interesting for us to hear the types of rumors and I guess also discussions that tend to take precedent, perhaps in the mass market, and those that may not necessarily be closest to the kind of EV or the EV charging industry. So final question is, if you could bust one myth about EVs or the EV charging industry, what would it be?
I really like that question. I had to have a thought on that. So I think the myth out there, which I would like to bust, is the question about batteries. And I think there tends to be this thinking that if a battery electric car, the battery doesn't last, then it breaks and it's expensive to basically replace. From the beginning, car manufacturers have been extending their guarantees and the kilometer number for their batteries. So they have been learning a lot, basically, and they've been starting to trust into their batteries. There was just an article which I read about an Hyundai, I think it was, which had been driven 600,000 kilometers. And they took it apart and looked at, okay, what's the situation here with the battery? And it had close to 90% of its capacity left. But if we look at basically the big picture, the batteries hold much longer than anyone had assumed. And the beautiful thing is, at that point of time, there's still a second life of batteries. So basically at the time when one says that, okay, that battery that doesn't work anymore for the car, we can start looking into second life applications for batteries. And another myth which is out there is that you can't recycle lithium batteries, and that is also wrong. So basically after second life, we can still even recycle the batteries. So if we think about sustainability in transportation, I think batteries are definitely the right choice, and I think we should all learn to trust the battery. It will last, it will have a second life, and it will be recycled in the end.
Very nice. The battery is your friend.
The battery is your friend. Yes.
Fantastic. Thanks, Rami. Thanks so much for today.
Yeah, thank you.
Fantastic conversation. Thanks for sharing all of your experience.
Thank you, guys. Really, it was a pleasure talking to you. And thanks for the opportunity to share a bit of my thoughts and also to share a bit what we do with beY0nd and how we want to increase trust in charging through benchmarking. And I hope that we get a lot of CPOs to join the game to have this service basically from CPOs to CPOs and getting this industry further ahead. Thank you, guys.
Excellent. Thank you, Rami.